poco a poco. Es para mí un placer enorme poder presentar aquí a Fabrizio Cardinali. I'll switch to English. Fabrizio is a key person in the e-learning scene all over the world. It's an Italian company, but with an international presence, and they are very strong participating in European projects. They are very strong in standardization organizations, IMS, etc. They are always at the front of the innovation in terms of e-learning. So this is why it's a pleasure for me to present Fabrizio Cardinali, CEO of Exact Learning Solutions, former Giunti Labs, but changed name recently, to present his talk about mobile learning, myth or reality, theory, trends and cases. Looking very much forward to your talk.
Thank you.
Fabrizio.
You think I can stand up? Do you hear me? Okay. Does everybody understands English? Who understands English? Okay, so I can speak English. Sorry for that, but I was deciding on speaking Italian, which presumably is better if you don't understand English, but if you understand English, maybe it's better to speak English, okay? So it's meeting midway. Yes, as the chair was correctly introducing, you might know me personally, and you might not know Exact Learning Solutions. Exact Learning Solutions is the new name of a company which was named Giunti Labs. So we have partnered with more or less all the Madrid universities. So we are in one or two projects with any or each of the Madrid universities. So you might know the former name. We exited the publishing group. Giunti is a very large publishing group, a little bit like maybe Anaya or Planeta here in Spain, leading of education in Italy. But we decided to go out from the group last August because publishing were getting a little bit nervous and overwhelming presence. We'll see why. And we think there's a much better development if we focus on the more than 150 clients that we have out there. So publishing was just 1%, our captive publishing was just 1% of our market, and that's why we did a management buyout, and now we are independent and working with even more publishers than before. You also might know us if you are part of enterprise, because we have several Spanish clients, and for example here in Madrid, Caja Madrid. Is there anybody from Caja Madrid? No? Okay, I invited them, but they are quite engaged in the merging that they are undergoing in these days to become the largest Spanish-speaking bank here in Spain. And also the Minister of Defense, for example, is one of our clients here in Madrid. And they are using our solutions, so our learning content management system and our digital repository solutions. And they're starting to look into the mobile solutions, which is what we might be talking about today. But since I have an hour, more or less, if confirmed, more than talking about the company and the case studies, real market case studies for mobile solutions that we are just launching also on Android in 2 weeks' time in the world-leading mobile learning conference in San Jose, I also wanted to take another hat of the many I have, and as in the introduction, talk more from a standards and from a strategical European perspective. I'm chair of European Learning Industry Group. Who knows what IIIG is? So IIIG is quite a relevant association, but not many know about it, and it might be worth to just put a slide up so that you might consider joining if you are a technology developer or a company. IIIG is a group, European Learning Industry Group. It's a non-for-profit association, and it was funded by Mrs. Redding, which is, let's say, the Prime Minister, one of the Prime Ministers of Europe. She was in 2000 to 2005 in the Prodi Commission. She was Prime Minister of Culture and Education. So she was the lady that when the people met in Lisbon, the Portuguese capital in 2000, defining a 5-year agenda for the knowledge society in Europe, she was responsible of education and culture. And in those nice days, the idea was that Europe would have become the leading knowledge society by 2005. There was a lot of investment from the European Commission, and it was good days for research and development. We all know more or less how that ended up, and we didn't become the world-leading knowledge society. Actually, we have big problems today when we talk about knowledge and scientific and technical dissemination. But she was re-elected, as it usually happens, you know, even if the agenda was not met. In 2006, in the Barroso Commission, she moved to Media and Information Society Commissioner. It was not just a political move, but it was also presumably a technical move, because presumably one of the solutions of the problem of education and culture in Europe is presumably technology. So she moved into media and information, and she started to progress with the unbundling of the infrastructure from the service level. So one of the main drivers of the market is when you separate things. So if you separate internet and the infrastructure of internet from those who deliver services on top of it, so that it's not just Telecom Italia or Telefonica, but anybody can play on an equal way, you get a much wider and more interesting market. So she did this in Europe very well in the media and information role that she had. And she also launched in 2006 in the Prague Declaration a new target that she called the I-2010 work program, which is all about the three I's: interoperability, individualization, and innovation. What she was saying is that the only way Europe can succeed and survive global competition was by doing real open systems at the IT and media level. So meaning interoperability, you could actually exchange data across information systems in e-government. And we're talking about eMadrid here. So the foundation is that if you are a citizen and you get enrolled into a system, your data record should be interoperable across the systems. Now, if you bring this to education, a student which is enrolled in UNED should be able to move to Bocconi University and have his portfolio uploaded dynamically into the school information system. We know this is a dream still, and it's not happening. But if you want to have real mobility today, mobility is virtual. So I should be able to enroll onto an online portal in Italy, and my personal ego, my personal portfolio, my personal track record should be interoperable. We're talking about European qualification framework, European credit transfer system, so that your credits and your qualifications can be recognized across the nations. All this is key to making interoperability succeed in Europe. Then we have individualization. I mean, we are getting Eastern and Southern Europe more and more enlarged, so it's a bigger and bigger Europe. But if you look at the population, it's older and older, and it's fewer and fewer. So if we need to compete with India, China, and in the future maybe Bangladesh, Pakistan, because that is the trend, the economy is going eastwards, we need to survive by engaging more and more people. So it's not just a matter of social engagement and engagement, but it's also a matter of business. I mean, we need to have elderly people in the cycle, disabled people in the cycle. We need to engage everybody. And to do this, we need to individualize the training. So everybody is different, and individualization is going to be key. The last I stand for innovation. Europe has always put the money where the ideas were, and a lot of people have criticized this. Huge investments, little returns. The change of perspective which has happened over the last 5 years has been in that rather than a lot of umbrella investments, to have more strategical approach to research and development. Bigger IP, integrated projects, but also wiser multicultural melting pots, so that technology companies like us, universities, publishers, they come and work together. And I would say that the new lifelong learning program, which started under Mrs. Redding, was correctly in that direction. But again, did we make it to become the leading knowledge society? No. We are actually one of the latest knowledge society amongst the Western and emerging economies. And the emerging economies are putting monies and investment in research, which are far beyond the percentage that we can do today in Europe. So there is a big problem. I mean, we need to survive, not to win or to compete. And that is the big trend today. And not by maybe only political move, Mrs. Redding has been moved to legal affairs. So is one of the ways protection? I mean, Barack Obama in US, I mean, as soon as he was elected, he started to give investments only to US patented technologies. Presumably that is one of the ways. Like it or not, it might be one of the trends. But I mean, the big agenda on which we are trying to help is to get Europe to invent the next big thing. And since we are talking about education, to invent the next big thing in technology-enhanced learning, which is a specific action line of the European research programs which deal with the things that we're talking about today. We are very, very active in ELIG. We are not only the chairs, but we are one of the founding members. The founding members, as you see here, were all very, very large multinationals. So you might smile that IBM, Intel, Microsoft, Cisco, Accenture, and Hitachi are in ELIG, European Learning Industry Group, but they are lobbyists. So they're very good in getting in Brussels, and there are their European branches. But luckily there were also a lot of European stakeholders and players, but we were very few. So we've done an impressive marketing about getting technology developers, smart leaders, and companies inside. And today we are more than 80 companies. So if you want to join, there's going to be the annual group meeting in Helsinki in October. I've got wildcard of invitation, so you don't need to engage physically in ELIG, and I can invite you to the annual meeting so that you can hear about what it's all about. Anyhow, what it's all about, it's mostly about studying trends and where the market is going so that we can consult the European Commission. We are an official one body that the Commission can go to and ask, what is the industry thinking? And I get regularly invited by all the decision takers there, and I go there to talk on your behalf. So it's maybe better if you engage and we talk more and more. So this today is not only an occasion to touch base, but also to share my views and my ideas, because this is what I'm saying to the Commission. So if it's not correct, please, let's talk in the coffee break and let's fine-tune it. Even better, you should actively engage in ELIG. So we can talk about that in the coffee also. So, but before talking about the future, let's see what's happened over the last 15 years in technology-enhanced learning. I mean, many of you, I think, at least the older ones, were engaged in the nice days of computer-based training, when it was much easier. I mean, there was much less technology, much more pedagogy, and we could just concentrate on the message rather than on the medium. When Internet came to the market in, let's say, around 98, 99, 2000, the real consumer market, we all know that it was there much before, but when this revolution came out in 2000, more or less, everybody went online, and the same thing happened for education. What university did, and luckily they were just American typically, and maybe British universities, they just brought the model online. They didn't change anything, and it happens with every new media. When the television was invented, it copied radio. When radio was invented, it copied theater. When Internet was invented and e-learning was more or less branded, what the university did, they just moved online. 6 years courses with 2,000 students, with one teacher having to manage them all, and with regularly paced courses. That was the easiest way to do it. And it seemed to be the El Dorado, the big promise of education. Huge investments, huge capitalizations. We had stock exchange bubble and so on. This was a big wave, but it turned out to be a tsunami in a couple of years. I mean, everything went bankrupt, because the real thing was much better. If I am an MIT or New York University student, it's much better to go to the university brick and mortar, have social experience, the real thing, if the thing that I have online is just term pages with no real people and no real interactions behind it. So it wasn't the right model. And it also gave the usually rocky train trend to the market. Everybody was disaffected. E-learning is rubbish. I mean, it doesn't work. A lot of people going out after the enrollment. So we went through what was an unsatisfied user issue. I mean, the average satisfaction per user, which is a jokey acronym, telecoms talk of ARPU, average return per user. We like to talk about average satisfaction per user, was very low. People were leaving their online courses. So the learning communities were not there. There was no real online learning community, and e-learning was not successful. Now, then the market started to change. We had the Facebook phenomena, we had social networking, we had personal media. People started to do what they wanted to see online alone, simply because universities, publishers, and service providers did it wrong. And they did it too early. I mean, when they got online, they put everything on the media rather than on the message. And they just, redid the traditional brick and mortar school. So it wasn't successful. They lost a lot of money and they got out of the market. Then the user got in and he said, this is what I want on the internet. This is how I want my education. So we can start talking about self-learning communities, people which are exchanging peer-to-peer information, assets, documents. They are chatting, they are socializing. You're really not controlling the phenomena. But luckily, since education is better than gambling, sex and games online, presumably they are doing it, they are trying to do education. But is it correct? Is it the right pedagogy? Is it the right way? You don't know. So we think that this is a transitional moment. It's a transition where the real stakeholders, universities, publishers, pedagogists, are not in the business model of online education, simply because there was a vacuum of large investments, self-made market, and now we still need to see the next big thing, which is the real personal learning online. And that is what is going to happen. So in the next 5 years, while we are talking, we will see a big infrastructure to match what is an overwhelming presence of learning objects, learning materials, very well done, because we know how to do content. Either publishers or self-made content, they are well done. They are well tagged, we have metadata, we have vocabularies, we have ontologies. But then we have personal development plans. We have people out there who've got a huge need for micro-skilling and very rapid skilling of their capabilities, competency-based education. They have problems to compete in a global economy. And at that point, we need to solve this with infrastructure and professional services. And we need professional players to get engaged. So what we see over the next 5 years is that formal learning and its technologies and know-how, like performance and talent management, skills and competency management, portfolio and identity management, labor and recruitment management, all good things, but too much rigid if you take them one by one, together with a self-made, cloud-based Web 2 approach with viral social content distribution and mobile. Everybody's got an iPad or an iPhone or a smartphone today. These things are going to come together, and they're going to create what we could say an e-learning 3.0. And that is where the business and the trend will become very interesting. Usually ups and downs, it happens always in every new technology, and the new technology will be personalized. We see that we call it in our labs personal ambient learning, because as if I turn into this room and I turn on the light, I enjoy the light, the electricity. I don't bother how complex it is to bring electricity here from the waterfalls or the carbon factory down to all the interoperability standards, all the stakeholders, everybody, and then I turn and enjoy the light. And I pay by consumption. I consume the light and I pay as much as I use it. The same paradigm will be in education. I mean, there will be a very, very complex infrastructure, cloud-based, standard-based, XML-based on the back end, with a lot of stakeholders, and the user will just pay for the service. And if it's a good service, the light stays on, you pay for it. If you don't like it, you don't just go out. You go out and you go to another provider. So there will be a very, very interesting global market for doing this. Now, there's a new term which is emerging, which is very useful, which is marketecture. You are engaged on technology, I guess, or on pedagogy, so mostly on the back-end part, on the architectural part. But architecture and technology innovation is useless if you don't have marketing and business drivers in front. So if you put marketing and technology together and you invent new services, you are going to lead the market. And this is a new term. It's marketecture. It's awful, but it's not mine. It's on Wikipedia. Marketecture means taking benefit of the huge innovations that we have on the technology and architectural side today, like web services, SOA, cloud, XML standards, and so on, with a new business model in front. So don't do the new technology the old way, but do use the new technology with new business models. And this, took publishers, for example, a huge time to understand in internet times. 10 years are a huge time in internet times. And they did it wrong, they lost it, and now they are rethinking the models. That's happening to publishing. But it should happen to universities, it should happen to training service providers, it should happen to governments, it should happen to anybody who wants to play into this field. And we'll see it later on. So how has the technology changed? We started off in 2000, more or less, let's take 2000 as a landmark, with the web CPs of those days. Everything was functional and closed into a closed system. There was no interoperability because there was just one player. And if you wanted to do learning materials and experiences on WebCT, you had to knock on their headquarters, I think it was in Boston in those days, and make a one-to-one agreement with them. It was successful. They made a huge amount of money in the buyout from Blackboard and so on, but it was a closed market. It was not a sustainable market. No big player like a publisher or a large university really wanted to play, because you can't do market with a one-to-one agreement with one single monopoly. So that didn't work. So we started to work, all of us, researchers and standards people, to get out of this lock-in syndrome. It took us some years, but luckily, at least from the interoperability, XML binding, content side, we have done. So today, if you want to interoperate content, if you want to tag them, if you want to break them apart, reaggregate them, move them across any platform, take them out from Blackboard and put them into Moodle, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's feasible. There are standards, there are systems, there are offering tools, content management systems, repository systems which make you do that. It's now a matter that the decision taker, the dean or the decision taker in the universities decides to do that, which takes more time, but the technology is there, no problem. So the first generation lockout has happened. Today, content is free. Free to the extent that you can do your own, or you can buy that from publishers. But that is still a first generation freedom. Future freedom will be at the paragraph level, or at the page level. So like music has demonstrated, everybody used to buy long plays. I mean, I was a fan of Genesis, Pink Floyd. We go out there, we bought those 25 tunes. If you like them or not, you can't pick and choose them. Today, my kids don't reason that way. They like Lady Gaga, Big Eyed Peas, and so on, and they mix and match, and they create their own playlist. Why shouldn't that happen on your textbook? Why shouldn't a professor say, I wrote this very nice introduction on computational physics. I want to have this from Macmillan or McGraw-Hill because they describe well the Brown law, and then I would want you to use this free open source paragraph about the implications of that law. Mix and match at the board, maybe a digital board, download it, Zoom to your iPad, and off you go and study it. Now, this is a model which technologically wise today is fully feasible. It's the business model of publishers working with open source communities and all together with a digital marketplace, presumably governmental-led, and not only iTunes, because otherwise, again, it's a monopoly. That still needs to happen at a regulatory, legal, and implementation level. Now, to do this, technically, and I assume you're all more or less technical here, you need to have the infrastructure, first of all. So you need to have service-oriented architectures. You need to have different players inside the architecture, interoperating standard data. Now, standards haven't been there yet. So what things that IMS, SCORM have failed, and I would say CEN, working groups, and others are not yet there strong enough to push, is a standard SOA for education. There was a try from MIT with the Open Knowledge Initiative. Who knows the Open Knowledge Initiative? Which failed more or less because there was not a real request yet. But the idea of the OKI initiative was that you break apart the e-learning platform, not only across the content management and delivery infrastructure, which today has already been done by IMS and SCORM, but you break apart everything: user data records, portfolio records, tracking records, you name it. Anything which is part of a process of education is defined as a service. It's got the gate, input and output of data, and it becomes a standard component, so that you can mix and match and build your e-learning platform on your own, the one that you want. If you're more test-driven, you will base on the assessment engine. If you're more content-driven, you will base it on the content management system, and that's where we are playing. If you're more delivery, on the learning management system. If you want some informal delivery, you would want to mash up YouTube, Google services, and so on. And you can do that by literally composing components. The good thing of SOAS is not only the freedom of composition, but it's also that there's a high portability. So it doesn't matter if it's Windows, Java, Symbian, Android, or you name it, because the interfaces are standard. It's just plugging and playing different components. The other thing is flexibility. You can really mix and match at the level of granularity and what you want. And finally, it's very convenient. You reuse code as you reuse learning objects. So you move from a reuse of content to a reuse of software and components. Now, if you don't standardize what is a component, you are going to have problems in mixing and matching different vendors. So that's where we are working on in all the standardization. And the idea, and this is the next 5 years, the next 5 years is not only SOA, but distributed, cloud-based, multi-vendor SOAs. So I'm Giuntio, I'm Planeta, I've got a very nice repository of learning materials on the Prado collection, very granular. So not the monolithic about Picasso, or the Guernica, but it's just, a piece of information. I expose it in Madrid, virtually, in my repository behind my firewall, and I have a third-party system in Italy, which calls this service, asks the metadata, retrieves the content, packages on demand, and gives a personal learning experience to a student visiting the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Because there, the end service is somebody which is facing the user, is individualizing, is understanding who he is, location-based, it's understanding what is his personal portfolio background, in terms he's an expert, he speaks English or in Spanish, he knows about art. So when you go out and harvest the content, it takes the right learning objects, which luckily, over the last 5 years, we are indexed in the right way. So this is the answer to why the hell are we doing all these learning objects with all these metadata and semantic richness. If you keep them aggregated in monolithic 6 hours or 6 days or 6 months courses, it's useless. You can now break them apart and reuse them if this is the future. And that's micropayment, microtransaction, a huge complexity back-end, but a very nice and easy front-end. So the student is in front of the Mona Lisa in the Louvre. The system understands location-based, GPS, built in the system. It hooks up to the portal, Wi-Fi, built in the system, or Bluetooth. It tells to the system, look, this guy is in France, is in Paris, in front of the Louvre painting, is logged in, authentication and authorization. Third-party system gives me my portfolio, my track record. He's been trained in, he's been having education in art, he knows this and that, and so on. And the system goes out, retrieves the content, and ships it on demand, with all the problems of semantic configuration. So it's an iPad, it doesn't support Flash, it's got this screen resolution, and so on. So in this 5-minute scenario, and we'll see it in videos and presentations if we have time later on, there's a huge chain of stakeholders and value of research that we've all been working on over the last 5 years, but now, with the advent of what we call the books of jobs,